I'm delighted to be with you today. I have some words of encouragement for the people in the audience that are living with diabetes or have a loved one with diabetes, but I also have some words of encouragement to those of you that are healthcare professionals who are caring for those of us with diabetes, because this whole journey, this life journey or path that we're on, we rely on each other to get the most out of the experience. So let me start by telling you where it all began, and then we'll end up with some inspiration. So like you heard from Lowell, when I was 19 years old and a freshman at Stetson University, not far from here, my life changed directions dramatically. I was on a stage like this one, performing, because I grew up loving music and loving to perform. And on that stage, my knees were knocking, my palms were sweating, I was nauseous, my head was swimming, I was nervous, but something much deeper was actually at work, and I didn't know. On the stage, when my name was called, I got up and I sang and performed. I then answered the questions that were asked of me. But backstage, when I would retreat back to the back, when it was someone else's turn, I would lie down on the cool tiles of the floor to try to relieve some of the pain that my body was feeling. All I can remember are the images of that day, the white walls, the white bed, the silver rails on the side. In fact, once I was admitted to the hospital, I didn't leave there for many, many days. That was when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. That was 28 years ago this week. And boy, I wish I would have known then what I know now. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got off to a real rocky start. You know, those first few days for anybody when they're dealing with a crisis are incredibly challenging. There's so many emotions, there's so much chaos. It's hard to hear the words that are being said to you and feel the feelings that you've got deep inside of you. And then when you go back home, you think, well, what did I hear? Do you remember feeling like that? Those of you who live in this world of diabetes, wait, what did they say? I was told a lot of things, many of which today are very unrealistic, but I'm going to tell you the story nonetheless, because not a week goes by that I don't hear from someone who had a similar experience. So in that early stage, what my story will indicate to you is that there is an intense need for compassionate communication and innovative education. You see, when I was in that white hospital bed and the healthcare team got me stabilized and came in to talk about what life would look like with type 1 diabetes, I was the only person at that time in my family to have diabetes, so we knew nothing about what life would entail. They came in and they said, "So you're a college student?" And of course, my face brightened up and I beamed. Yes, I'm in my freshman year. Will be the first woman in my family to graduate from college. And that the team that was caring for me said, "You need to drop out of college. You're not going to be smart enough to continue because diabetes is going to affect your brain." Well, in that moment, I was crushed, as you can imagine. And they said, "Well, what do you want to do with your life?" And I, again, brightened up, as you can tell by my personality, right? I said, "I want to be a journalist. I want to tell stories. I want to write stories." And they said, "Oh, we think you should choose something different. Journalists don't eat lunch at the same time every day." That's true. They said, "And you with diabetes," now this was 28 years ago, "you need to eat on a regular schedule and you need to maintain a very predictable schedule to be in optimal health." Well, again, I felt like a ton of bricks had just crushed on my chest and crushing my dreams. And then they said, were you really in a pageant a couple nights ago? And I said to them, yes, I was, and they were giving away $1,000, which would pay for the entire semester. Not anymore, exactly. And if you would have helped me when I came in here 2 weeks ago, I would have gotten $1,000. But I got 500, so I'm 500 short. And they looked at me befuddled and said, don't ever do that again. And I said, why? I was the runner-up. This is great. And now I've learned how I can earn some scholarship dollars. They said, no, with type 1 diabetes, high-stress environments will be really difficult for you. And the best thing you can do is to avoid those circumstances. Again, just crushed, right? You can imagine, I hope you're picturing this moment or thinking about some stories that you share that are similar. One more thing happened in that span of that 15-minute conversation, and this one was perhaps the most difficult to manage because it had repercussions that lasted incredibly long. So the health team took my parents into the hallway and had a conversation without them. And I often characterize this for my healthcare professional friends. It was a conversation about me without me, which is not a great plan. We've learned so much in this period of time. But they were out there talking. When they came back in, my parents stared at the floor with tears streaming down their face. And the team that was discussing with me sat on the end of the bed that I was lying in and patted my leg and said, we need to talk about family planning. And of course, my 19-year-old brain just completely shut down at that moment. I thought, this is not what I want to talk about. They proceeded to share with me that I would never have a child because I have type 1 diabetes. And you see, my parents had just been told that they would never be grandparents. Wow, what a beginning that was. So, I will give you a picture. That is a picture of that day when all of that advice was given to me. And yet, I still maintain a smile and optimism. My hope was at the lowest of lows, and the coming days, I had no idea the downward spiral that I would make emotionally, psychologically. Because as I left the hospital, I dropped out of college. I moved back in with my mom and dad. I got a job in a bank. I decided I would never have a baby, and that this was just going to be my reality. But our lives are not determined by what happens to us, but rather by how we respond to what happens. And it didn't take long for me to realize that my response was not healthy for me. And that with the team, the tribe that I have around me, my family, our friends, our church family, the people that loved and cared about me, that I owed it to myself to try at life. And I had the great privilege of going back to college and, of course, getting a couple of degrees. You can be smart and have diabetes. I had the great privilege of hosting an award-winning television show on CNBC for 5 years. It's now not on anymore, but it was called D-Life. How perfect is that? God sent me to have a diabetes talk show. And I won an award by doing reverse hardball on Chris Matthews. I graduated with my doctoral degree, as you heard in the introduction. And then, of course, in 1998, my name was called on a stage kind of like this, against all odds, with everybody my mom and dad had said, they're not going to pick you. You've got something wrong with you. You wear a device. This won't work out. All of those negative words were coming at me, but we said, we're just going to try. Let's just see what happens. Because if you don't, then you won't ever know. Let me correct that story. There was a few healthcare professionals that were standing right there beside and behind me, pushing me forward as well. If you hadn't guessed, I found a whole new healthcare team that was optimistic, had a can-do attitude, had creative communication, and innovative education. And when I would come up with a big idea, they'd say, okay, let's see how we can figure out how to make that happen together. And that's exactly how all of those things were possible. So much has changed from that rocky start, but I must acknowledge that in that rocky period, those negative words that, by the way, were said in a well-meaning fashion. So we must never forget that people sometimes say words, they have a different meaning than our interpretation. So they were said in a well-meaning fashion, but those words truly affected me to my core. There was about a 5-year period that I struggled with depression, with despair. I thought of doing the unthinkable. I had girlfriends that would talk about, how could we just end this pain that we're in, living with type 1 diabetes? But there is always an answer. And if you surround yourself with people that are hopeful, people that have faith, people that have optimism, you can, little by little, claw your way out. And that's what happened to me. And so this journey was not easy, from diagnosis to Miss America, which was 5 years, and then beyond. None of it was easy. All of it was hard fought. But every small little victory or accomplishment gave me confidence to try the next thing and to push just a little bit harder. And it didn't hurt that technology was bustling and building at that same point in time. So 28 years ago, when I was diagnosed, and I've met a couple of other folks that have had diabetes about the same amount of time, I had a meter that was super big, by the way, bigger than your hand, and I thought it was really cool that it took 90 seconds, sometimes 60, to give me my blood sugar. Today, I just look at my insulin pump on my waistband, a light comes on, and it tells me what my blood sugar is. Wow, what a transformative change. 28 years ago, I started diabetes by mixing 2 different forms of insulin. Sometimes we call the long-acting one not particularly helpful because you didn't actually know when it was going to work. In fact, the name of the long-acting was NPH, so not particularly helpful. Because sometimes it would act in like 5 hours, sometimes it would be 10. Yeah. It was acting sometime. And quickly, within just a couple of years of diagnosis, new products hit the market. Fast-acting insulin, which I'm sure everybody in this room uses a form of fast-acting insulin if you are using insulin. Those weren't always around. What a transformative change. And then in 1998, that's when I was at Miss America and was wearing an insulin pump. That was the year that insulin pumps boomed on the market. If only someone had told this young woman that was going to happen. But people started to see it as socially acceptable. Today, it's hard to have a day or two go by without seeing someone with a sensor on their arm or a pump on their waistband. I am thrilled by the progress that has happened and the adoption of technology tools. If you are not using one of those tools, I would plead with you to consider it, because that has been the single reason why I have been able to maintain such good control and care for my diabetes, and why I have been able to do so many remarkable things throughout my life and my career. So today, for the last 5 years or so, my A1C has been that of a normal person. What diabetes? Well, yeah, we still have diabetes, and we still have to do the things that we have to do. But how freeing, and how emotionally and psychologically uplifting. So all of this combined together has helped in tremendous ways. But there's one more accomplishment that came along. You know, in all those nevers and couldn'ts and shouldn'ts, one of those was about a baby. And in 2006, a baby came on the scene, and now she's a young lady. And she's here today, actually. Ava, you can wave from the back. She's wearing a new sash. So I will tell you, my daughter is, you know, the thing that amazes me most in this world. And it makes a mom cry, doesn't it? And the thing that I'm most grateful for. You see, in the early days, I listened to those negative words. But those words were not the end of the story. And I thank God for meeting healthcare professionals, caring adults, leaders that have come alongside of me as a human being and said, I believe, I think you can. Let's just give it a try. And that happened with a healthcare professional when I expressed my dismay about not being able to have a child. And this healthcare professional has passed on now. But she said, why not? Let's just see. Let's just give it a shot, and I'm with you every step of the way. You know, she also infused me with words of wisdom from others. And so that's why I'm showing these to you on the screen. This Eleanor Roosevelt quote is the one that sticks with me on a daily basis the very most. It says, as you can read here, you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop and you look fear in the face. And then I'll paraphrase and say, and you do what you think you cannot do. Please remember that. Whatever fear it is that you are encountering or that you live with, look it in the face and tell it, I have the strength, I have the courage, I think that I can, I will try, and just watch and see what I just might do. You don't have to figure out the entire problem at one moment. In fact, now as a mom of a teen, I say pretty frequently, you just bite off one piece at a time. And I'll tell you, the secret to doing that is becoming a strength detective. What is it that you're good at? Use whatever that is, your innate strength, and apply it to whatever challenge it is that you're facing. For me, at the early time of my life, my strength was competition. It's what motivated me. And so competition became my motivator to do better with my diabetes. The next thing, invest in optimism or belief. Find ways to affirm to yourself possibility and look at the potential, not in the negative. It's affect. This is how I was able to pull out of the dark places that I, at times, found myself in with diabetes. And then finally, realizing that there are helping hands all around us. We just have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and then we have to have the confidence to reach out our hand and say, I need you. And one of the things that I'm privileged to do now with the American Diabetes Association is help with a variety of programs, but one of those is around health equity and making sure that we are taking care and acknowledging the challenges that exist in our society and reaching out and be helping as a community. I urge you to do that as well. And just the fact that you're here today shows that you are and that you are willing. If you'll pass it forward, things that you learn today, to someone else, to just one person, think of the ripple effect that will result. And so in closing, I brought one additional thing to share with you. I brought my lunchbox. This lunchbox is from the year I was born. I won't tell you what year that is, but you could probably guess by seeing the lunchbox. It's metal. And it's a Miss America lunchbox. And so later I'll be downstairs and you can come see it if you would like. This lunchbox is pretty beaten up. It's got some bumps and some bruises on it. It's missing paint in some places. Doesn't quite have the sparkle that it used to have. It's kind of like me. It's probably kind of like you too, right? We've been on quite a journey with diabetes. And I know at least I have. What's inside this box is a trophy that I once received. It too has some bumps and bruises. It's sparkly to you. But when I look at it, it's missing a couple of stones. It's got a couple of pieces that have broken off from time to time. But the bruises on it make it more beautiful than the day I received it in its brand new condition. And that's actually what I have to say to the people with diabetes in this room. That although the journey is challenging, and although there are days when it's painful, and you may want to just shed a tear or forget about it, all of the days piled up on top of each other make your story incredible, because your story is one of strength, of ability, of perseverance. And the piece that weaves us all together is that yes, we can. Regardless of what anyone else ever says, regardless of the doubts that we have, we need only look at people like Lowell, people like others here in the audience. You can even look to my story as well. That there were days when I thought I couldn't, but the truth is that you can. And when you have a community of support around you, like the one built here, like what we find with Help a Diabetic Child, the possibilities are truly endless. And so with that, I congratulate you for being here, for learning today, for investing in knowledge, but also for being the community to the people who are sitting next to you. God bless you.